It was a Tuesday night in the 6th year of my marriage. He told me it was my duty, and I believed him. Duty. For 6 years, I believed what I was told, until one night, I said no. It was a Tuesday night in the 6th year of my marriage. I don't know why I remember it, but somehow that night never left me. 6 years. It had been 6 years. And for the first time, I tried to count what those years really meant. And I lay there with that number, 6. 6 years. 6 whole years. And I tried to calculate something I had never tried to calculate before, under that word. Duty. He had used that word in the first week of our marriage. Said it simply, without cruelty. This is my right, Rebecca, and your duty. The bishop said so. The scripture says so. That is simply what this is. And I had believed him. For 6 years, I had believed him. On that Tuesday night, lying with my face toward the wall, had a single new thought. I don't think that's true. Just that. Small. Quiet. But once it arrived, my name is Rebecca. I grew up Old Order Amish in Holmes County, Ohio, and I left the community 5 years ago. This channel, Beyond the Bonnet, is where I finally account for the things I believed for years because I had been taught to believe them and had never been given permission to question them. Subscribe and hit the like button if you want honest stories from behind the bonnet. 2 seconds. It means everything. I want to make you a specific promise before this video continues. By the end of what I am about to tell you, I am going to name the belief precisely. Not just where it came from or what it looked like from the outside. The actual interior of it, what it felt like to hold it, night after night for 6 years, in a marriage with a man who was not cruel, and a God I genuinely believed in, and a community that had agreed, collectively and thoroughly, that what I was being asked to do was faithfulness. I am going to name it, because I spent 6 years without a name for it, and the absence of the name is part of what kept it in place. Leave me a comment before you go. Has anyone ever told you that something was your duty? Not asked you, told you, and how long did it take before you questioned whether that was true? I will read every answer. Now, the 6 years. The word duty is not an Amish word. I want to say that clearly because I spent years believing it was. Believing that what Samuel told me in the first week of our marriage was a specifically Amish understanding, something rooted in the particular theology of Old Order community life, in the Ordnung, in the bishop's interpretation of Paul's letters. It is not specifically Amish. It is ancient. The concept that a wife owes her husband intimate access as a matter of obligation, not desire, not agreement, not mutual choosing, but obligation, runs through centuries of religious and legal tradition so comprehensively that locating its origin is like trying to find where a river begins. It has been embedded in marriage ceremonies, church doctrine, common law, civil law, pastoral counseling, and the private language of husbands telling wives what their bodies are for. The Amish community received this tradition. They did not invent it. But here is what the Amish community did that amplifies the tradition into something particular. They removed every possible counter-narrative. In the English world, a woman in a marriage that operates under the duty doctrine has access, in theory, to other voices. A friend who tells her something different. A therapist who names the harm. A book, an article, a conversation overheard on a bus. The counter-narrative exists, even when it's hard to reach. Inside Old Order Amish community life, the counter-narrative does not exist. There is the bishop. There is the scripture, as interpreted. There is the community, which has agreed. And there is your husband, who tells you what that agreement means in practice, in your particular bedroom, on your particular Tuesday nights. That is all there is. And so the duty doctrine doesn't just exist inside Amish marriages. It operates without friction, without challenge, without a single voice available to say, "Wait, is that actually what the scripture says? Is that what God actually requires? Has anyone asked the woman in this room what she thinks?" It operates like gravity, unquestioned, because the mechanism for questioning it has been removed. That is what I grew up inside, and that is what made 6 years possible. I want to take you through the 6 years slowly, not because I want you to suffer through them with me, I have done enough of that already, but because the number matters. Because 6 years is not a night or a month, or even the first year when everything is new and strange, and perhaps the strangeness explains the wrongness. 6 years is a life. 6 years is a settled thing. 6 years is something you have organized yourself around and called normal. Year 1. I believed because I had been told. Samuel said it was my duty. The bishop had said it at the wedding, not in those words, but in words that meant the same thing when translated through the sermon into actual practice. I was a new wife. I was faithful. I did what faith required. I also told myself that what I was feeling, the particular hollowness of doing something I did not want to do while believing I was supposed to want to do it, was a spiritual deficiency on my part. A weakness of the flesh, not of the arrangement. If I prayed more, if I submitted more fully, if I brought my will more completely into alignment with God's design for my marriage, the hollowness would fill. I prayed more. The hollowness did not fill. Year 2. I stopped expecting the hollowness to fill. I began to understand it as the texture of faithfulness, the particular sensation of doing the right thing when the right thing is hard. This is what sacrifice feels like, I told myself. This is what a godly wife carries. Other women carry it. I can carry it too. I carried it. Quietly. Without complaint. Because complaint, I had been thoroughly taught, was the opposite of submission. And submission was the closest thing I had to freedom. The freedom that comes from yielding to something larger than yourself and trusting that the yielding is correct. Year 3. Something changed that I didn't have words for yet. Not in the marriage, not externally, everything looked the same from the outside. But something interior shifted. The carrying became heavier in a way I couldn't explain. The hollowness developed an edge that hadn't been there before. Not quite anger, I didn't have permission for anger, and I wasn't even sure what I would have been angry at. Just a sharpness, somewhere inside the carrying. I attributed it to pride, the flesh asserting itself. I prayed about the sharpness the same way I had prayed about the hollowness. Year 4. I stopped praying about it. Not because I stopped believing in prayer, but because I began to have a suspicion. Quiet, underground, never fully formed, that the thing I was praying to be cured of might not be the problem. I did not follow that suspicion. I buried it. But it was there. Year 5. I became very good at being elsewhere. Not physically. I was in the room, in the bed, present in every external sense, but I had developed a capacity for interior absence that I had not known was possible before my marriage. I could be somewhere else entirely, in the garden before sunrise, on the road between our farm and the neighbors, anywhere quiet and mine, while my body remained where duty required it to be. I thought of this as a skill. I was proud of it in a specific underground way I never mentioned to anyone. Year 6. That Tuesday night, my face toward the wall, the number, 6 years. And then, I don't think that's true. The crack, when it came, did not come from outside. No book, no English woman with a counter-narrative, no therapist, not yet, no friend who said something that opened a door. The crack came from inside. From the 6 years themselves, from the weight of 6 years finally pressing against a wall that had been built to hold the weight, but had, very slowly, over very long time, developed a fracture. What I thought, lying there that Tuesday night, was not complex. It was almost embarrassingly simple. It was this. I have never been asked. Not once. Not in 6 years. Not on the first night or the 100th night or any Tuesday night in between. Not in a moment of tenderness or a moment of distance or a moment of any emotional temperature at all, I had been told. In the first week. By a man who had also been told, by his father, by the bishop, by the particular theology of authority and submission that the community had handed him as clearly as it had handed me my duty. He had been told this was his right, and he had believed it. And because he believed it, and because I believed it, and because the community had agreed and the scripture had been interpreted and the bishop had spoken, the question had never been asked. Would you like to? 3 words, 6 years. 3 words that had never been said in that room. I lay with that for a long time, and then I did something I had not done in 6 years of marriage. I said no. Quietly. Without anger, without explanation, without apology. Just no. The silence that followed was different from any silence I had known in that room before. Here's what I expected to happen when I said no. I expected correction. Some form of it, gentle or less gentle, spoken or communicated in a way that required no words. I expected the weight of the doctrine to reassert itself. The bishop, the scripture, the duty that had been named in the first week and had governed every week since. What happened instead was that Samuel lay very still for a moment, and then he said, "All right." Just that. All right. And he went to sleep. I lay there for a long time in a darkness that felt different from any I had experienced in 6 years of Tuesday nights. Not comfortable. It was too strange for comfortable. But different. The particular strangeness of a space that has always had a wall in it, and then the wall is gone, and you don't know yet what to do with the space where the wall was. What I understood, slowly, over the following days and weeks, was something I had not been prepared to understand. The doctrine had not been tested, not once in 6 years, not because it was unquestionable, but because neither of us had ever questioned it. Samuel had been given a doctrine. He had held it the way you hold something you were given without being asked whether you wanted it, without examination, without questioning whether it was true, because it had arrived with the authority of the community and the scripture and the bishop behind it. When I removed my agreement, the doctrine had nothing to stand on. Not because Samuel was a bad man, because the doctrine was not real. It had only been real as long as we had both treated it as real. The moment I stopped, it stopped. 6 years. For a doctrine that dissolved the first time someone said no. I want to name the belief now, not in the language I had for it inside my marriage, in the language I found after. The belief was this: my body existed, in marriage, for a purpose outside myself. Its responses, what it wanted, what it didn't want, what it felt, what it needed, were not information relevant to the marriage. They were flesh to be subdued in service of faithfulness. That is the belief, stated precisely. It contains several smaller beliefs that I want to pull apart because each one was doing specific work. The belief that my body's responses were not information. This is the deepest one. It meant that what I felt, the hollowness, the sharpness, the interior absence I developed in year 5, was not data about the marriage or about me or about whether anything needed to change. It was simply the flesh asserting itself in ways that faithfulness required me to override. My body was speaking. The belief told me the speaking didn't count. The belief that subduing my body was faithfulness. This one reframed obedience to a doctrine as a spiritual virtue, which meant that questioning the doctrine was not inquiry, it was spiritual failure. Every time the underground suspicion arose, the thing I'm praying to be cured of might not be the problem, the belief caught it and named it disobedience, and I buried it again. The belief that his right and my duty were the same thing. This is the one I stayed with the longest after the Tuesday night, because they are not the same thing. His right, as he understood it, was a claim on my body. My duty, as I understood it, was to honor that claim. But a right and a duty are two different things, and treating them as the same thing made it impossible to examine either one without feeling that I was attacking both. He was not making a claim. He was exercising a right. I was not complying. I was fulfilling a duty. The language made it seamless. The language made it structural. The language made it 6 years. When I said no on that Tuesday night, I wasn't refusing a request. I was removing my agreement from a doctrine that had been operating, unchallenged, inside my marriage since the first week. And the doctrine fell. The belief served the marriage, not the marriage as a mutual relationship between two people who had chosen each other, the marriage as an institution, as a structure that existed to produce certain outcomes: stability, children, the continuity of the community, the orderly transfer of land and labor across generations. An institution that requires a woman's continuous, unconsented participation in intimate life must make that participation feel like her choice, or, failing that, like her duty. Because a woman who understands that she is participating in something not of her choosing is a woman who might stop. Duty does the work that choice refuses to do. The belief told me that what I was doing every night was faithfulness. It told Samuel that what he was receiving was his right. It told the community that what was happening in our bedroom was God's design. And everyone nodded, and no one asked, and 6 years passed. The belief was not there to serve me. It was not there to serve Samuel. It was there to serve the institution. And the institution does not care what it costs the people inside it, as long as the institution continues. Samuel said, "All right. I have thought about that word many times. 2 syllables, the absence of argument, the particular sound of a man who had also been handed something, a right, a doctrine, a word, and who, when I declined to participate in that word any longer, found that he had no desire to enforce it. He had believed the doctrine the same way I had, not from cruelty, from the same community, the same theology, the same absence of any voice that said, 'Have you asked her? Has she been asked?' He had not been cruel. He had been handed a belief and had held it the way you hold something you are given without being asked. And when I removed my agreement, he said, 'All right, I hold that.' Not as vindication of the 6 years, they are not vindicated, but as evidence that the man and the doctrine are not the same thing, that what the institution required and what Samuel wanted, what he actually, personally, humanly wanted, were not identical. That the doctrine had been operating inside our marriage without either of us examining whether it was something we actually believed or just something we had both been handed and had never put down. He said, 'All right.' And in the 'all right,' I heard something small and real and his: relief. He told me it was my duty, and I believed him for 6 years, not because I was weak, not because I was foolish, not because I failed to think clearly or feel clearly or know what I was carrying. I believed him because I had been raised inside a world that had agreed, with one voice, that this was what faithfulness looked like, that this was what a godly wife carried, that this was the shape of submission, and submission was the shape of love. I believed him because every voice available to me confirmed what he said, and the belief cost me 6 years. Not 6 years of dramatic suffering. I want to be careful about that because the word suffering carries a weight I don't want to overclaim. 6 years of a particular hollowness, of interior absence, of a small underground suspicion I buried over and over because I had been taught that the suspicion was the problem and not the thing the suspicion was pointing at. The suspicion was not the problem. The belief was the problem. And the belief fell the first time I stopped holding it up. If you are watching this and you have been told that something is your duty, in a marriage, in a relationship, in any space where someone had the authority to tell you what your body is for, I want you to hear this. Duty is not the same as choice, and a word given to you without your consent is not a word you are required to keep. You are allowed to set it down. Leave me a comment. Tell me, have you ever held a belief about yourself, your body, your place in a relationship that you didn't know was a belief because it had been given to you so early and so completely that it simply felt like the truth? Tell me yes, or tell me how long you held it before you set it down. Subscribe to Beyond the Bonnet. Every video I make is another belief I am setting down in public so someone else doesn't have to carry it alone. We are not done. Until next time. Duty is not love. Choose your freedoms wisely. They might just save your life.